Does. You know,
Just been
I
told it's a
have an
miss.
unquenchable thirst for validation, farm out my self-worth to external approval in this way that I, honestly, I know shrinks will tell you steer away from that, but it's pretty damn gratifying. I would never think when I meet people and I'm away from cameras and lights to ever put on a show, or even if I'm feeling crazy on the inside, I will be
Yeah.
quiet and reserved and kind of, you know, straight.
Blake, I'll start with you. How emotional did this
The
role
RCA dog make me?
What's that?
How emotional does seeing the RCA dog this morning make me? I mean, honestly, all I eat, sleep, and breathe is this movie. I am so proud of this movie, and that's all I've eaten, slept, and breathed. that's a hard thing to past tense it. For like the past year and a half. Like, that's a great example. Watching Deadpool and Wolverine in an audience of people, if you're watching that at home, like, it's just, there's the human experience of people watching and feeling together. Or a big budget movie that's fun and silly and profoundly emotional and impactful, like Deadpool, Wolverine in theaters now.
Yes.
I'm working double time, you guys.
Yeah,
I am double duty.
Hi everyone, it's Katie. Welcome back to my channel. In federal court yesterday, Judge Lewis Lehman made an interesting statement about the case between Justin Baldoni and Blake Lively. He described it as a battle between feuding PR teams, one representing Blake Lively and the other backing Justin Baldoni. This isn't just a personal dispute, it's a fight for public perception, where both sides are accused of running smear campaigns to control the narrative. And we, the public, are left trying to piece together the truth. Well, today, I feel like I've gained a clearer understanding of what might have happened thanks to a new legal filing from Brian Fredman and his team. Their response to emotion involving Leslie Sloan and Vision PR sheds more light on this situation. For a while now, many of us have wondered, what was the real motive behind this lawsuit? Why did she file it in December, long after the controversy had started to fade? Most of the backlash she faced was already dying down. She could have simply moved on, let it go, and avoided reigniting the drama, but instead, she did the opposite. She poured gasoline on the fire, turning it into a raging bonfire that's now spiraling out of control. She thought she could take back control of the public narrative by framing herself as the victim. However, that plan seems to have backfired. As more evidence emerges, much of it contradicts her claims, further complicating the story. The evidence continues to pile up. Emails, texts, and even video footage that contradict her claims. It's hard to argue against video proof, just as it's difficult to deny emails or text messages. And when multiple witnesses who were in the same room say they didn't see what she claims happened, her case weakens even further. With all of this unfolding, we've spent a lot of time analyzing the details and trying to understand the real motivations behind this lawsuit. Now, a new legal filing lays out Wayfair's perspective on what really happened. According to the filing, after taking full creative control over the film and its marketing, Blake Lively had only herself, along with her publicist Leslie Sloan, and Sloan's PR firm, Vision PR, to blame when the film's disastrously tone-deaf marketing campaign damaged her public image. The filing claims that, in a desperate attempt to salvage her reputation and escape the backlash, Sloan and her team allegedly conspired with Lively consolidated defendants Ryan Reynolds and the New York Times to shift the blame onto the Wayfair team. Wayfair alleges that Sloan's team worked for months to drop breadcrumbs, subtly hinting at damaging allegations while secretly feeding false and defamatory information to any reporter willing to listen, including Megan Toohey from the New York Times. As a result, Wayfair says their reputations were destroyed, their businesses crumbled, and their own film was taken from them. These are the core allegations Wayfair has made, and they claim the evidence will prove them in court. What's confusing to many, including myself and so many of you in the comments, is why they waited until December to file this lawsuit. By then, months had passed since the film's release, and much of the backlash had died down. In theory, Lively could have moved on and rebuilt her image. But here's the thing, Ryan and Blake are known for being highly sensitive to criticism. They don't take it lightly. Ryan has even admitted in interviews that he struggles with rejection, saying that even minor setbacks feel devastating to him. So, was this lawsuit an attempt to control the narrative? Was it about shifting blame rather than accepting the consequences of a failed PR strategy? That's the question we're left asking. And as this case unfolds, we'll be watching closely to see what happens next.
I look at authorship and control, or however you want to frame it, as trust. Like, I had a point of view when I was when I had no power. And I would be nervous, and I knew the stakes, but I had absolutely no input into
Yeah.
what happens. And when you have a point of view
Yeah.
and it can't be expressed, even though you try,
It's like something, a monkey rattling a cage.
yeah,
It's gonna like start
right?
chewing the bars.
Terrible
Yeah.
feeling. And people, when you do try to express the point of view and you're sort of placated or told, that we're not going to do that, or you say something that sort of feels reasonable, like, let's stop spending on spectacle and let's spend on character.
Yeah.
Or like, why are we putting all the money in special effects when we could just write,
Right.
and that's sort of dismissed. If that happens a couple of times, you sort of go, okay, but at the end of the day, they're not writing the story about how, Philistine movie bombs. They're saying they use the actor who's in it, right?
Right,
So
yes, yes.
I own the bomb.
One thing that's become crystal clear to me is that much of what Blake Lively said on the red carpet and in interviews were carefully crafted talking points, sound bites she likely picked up from her husband, Ryan Reynolds. He often talks about authorship, but to him, authorship means control. He doesn't handle rejection well, even if it's just an idea he believes in being dismissed. When that happens, he feels powerless, and that need for control is what fuels him. Ryan was shut down by Justin early on when he wasn't happy with a rooftop scene, one that Blake publicly claimed she wrote, but in reality, Ryan had written. This rejection played a major role in fueling the tensions between Blake and Justin, and much of the drama between them was being stirred up by Ryan himself. Both Ryan and Blake crave control, and it seems like that initial rejection ignited a deep resentment. They genuinely believe they know better, that they have a superior vision and a better understanding of how to shape this film. But when things don't go their way, especially in Ryan's case, it becomes personal. He has openly admitted that he thrives on validation and attention, that he lives for the admiration he gets from audiences. It's almost like an addiction for him. He has even called himself a narcissist, acknowledging that his entire self-worth is tied to being seen as the charming, beloved star. But when that admiration fades, or when people don't see him as the great guy he wants to be, that's when his defensive side comes out. And that explains why some of the actions taken in this case feel so irrational. They come from a place of wounded pride rather than logic. When you start digging into how the PR industry operates, it becomes clear how ruthless and manipulative these strategies are. At this point, it's hard to take anything at face value when it comes to celebrities. Every time I see an article about a star, I can't help but wonder, what's the spin? What narrative are they trying to control? What are they trying to get ahead of? Nothing feels genuine anymore. And if this case serves any purpose for the wider public, it's that it exposes just how much we, as consumers, are being manipulated by celebrities and their PR teams. It's no secret that Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively have had incredible PR teams shaping their public image for years. Their reputation has been carefully managed, making the idea that they'd be involved in something like this seem completely out of character. And yet, despite the evidence stacking up, there's a group of people who blindly believe whatever Blake and Ryan say. If you dare to question their version of events, you're suddenly labeled as an alt-right misogynist or accused of pushing a biased narrative. But that's simply not true. So, let's dive into another key part of this story, one that gave me a lot of answers. This information comes from the response to the motion to dismiss. According to the filing, on December 31st, 2022, Blake Lively officially agreed to take on the lead role of Lily Bloom. She was also given an executive producer credit. However, this wasn't a role that required her to contribute beyond acting. Her producer title was more of a vanity credit with no real responsibilities. Initially, everything seemed to be running smoothly, but soon Blake started overstepping her contractual boundaries. She took over the wardrobe department, pushing the budget far beyond its limits. She insisted on rewriting key scenes herself, and when those rewrites weren't met with enthusiasm, she called in her famous husband and friends to back her up. Her interference didn't stop there. She was making daily changes to the script, which caused disruptions throughout production. The team at Wayfair reportedly had to tiptoe around her demands, fearing backlash from both Blake and Ryan. These disruptions led to costly delays and major financial losses. At one point, Blake even gave Justin Baldoni an ultimatum. Either he accepted her way of doing things, or she might have to be recast. On set, she carried herself with a casual but dominant attitude. She even invited Baldoni into her trailer while she was pumping breast milk, using terms like sexy in conversation. Yet later, she publicly criticized others for using similar language. The irony? She has openly admitted in interviews that she enters projects like a wrecking ball, describing her approach as overwhelming, like drinking straight from a fire hose. She thrives on control. And now, whenever you hear the word authorship in connection to her, just know that it's another way of saying she wants full control over everything. This situation sheds even more light on what really went down behind the scenes. And as more details come to the surface, it's becoming increasingly clear that this isn't just about creative differences, it's about power, control, and an attempt to rewrite the narrative. At this point, it's clear that when Blake Lively talks about authorship, it's really just a code word for control. The creative differences between her and the production team only grew more intense over time. Initially, after everything was sorted out, filming resumed without any major issues. But once production wrapped up, things took a turn. Gradually, and then completely, Blake took over the film's editing process, essentially forcing Sony and Wayfair into releasing her version of the film. This was despite poor audience test screenings, which signaled that her creative choices weren't resonating with viewers. She didn't stop there. She also took full control over the film's marketing, erasing Justin Baldoni from the promotional materials entirely. Instead of focusing on the movie itself, she pushed a lighthearted, overly polished campaign that prioritized her personal brand and products over the actual story. This decision would later backfire in a major way. Even after all of this, Blake continued to demand more recognition, insisting that Wayfair support her request for the highly respected PGA mark, a credit reserved for producers who genuinely contribute to a film's production. However, she hadn't actually earned that title. Her determination to control every aspect of this project, from filming to editing to marketing, has ultimately led to the very backlash she was trying to avoid. And now, as more details surface, it's becoming clear just how far she was willing to go to reshape the narrative in her favor. As the premiere of the film approached in the summer of 2024, Blake Lively made a bold move. She told Sony that she and the rest of the cast would not participate in any marketing or promotional events alongside Justin Baldoni. This decision deliberately created the false impression that Baldoni had done something serious or inappropriate, effectively isolating him from the film's release. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, Leslie Sloan was allegedly working to spread false and defamatory claims about the Wayfair team to members of the press. These efforts not only damaged Wayfair's reputation, but also acted as leverage for Blake's coercive tactics. What's important to note is that this campaign against Wayfair began long before Blake faced backlash for her misguided marketing strategies, which included using the film's promotion as a platform to push her alcohol and hair care brands. Another interesting point, Blake has publicly stated that subpoenas were issued for the phone records of Melissa Nathan and Jen Ale, but here's the catch. There's no way she would have been able to access actual text messages this way. Companies that provide phone records can only release data on when texts were sent, not the content of the messages themselves. The only way those messages could have been retrieved is if someone with inside access, like Stephanie Jones, obtained them directly. According to the filing, as Wayfair and Baldoni distanced themselves from their increasingly unpredictable publicist, Stephanie Jones, she reacted with aggression. In a shocking move, she allegedly seized the phone of outgoing publicist Jen L., who had been the primary point of contact for Wayfair. Jones then reportedly combed through the device, searching for damaging information, and immediately turned over whatever she found to the press. This situation just keeps getting messier, and as more details emerge, it's becoming increasingly clear how deep the manipulation ran. What started as a battle over creative control has spiraled into a full-blown PR war, one that has left reputations in ruins and raised serious questions about the power of Hollywood's publicity machine. On the same day that Jen Ale allegedly turned over her phone, Leslie Sloan called Melissa Nathan, warning her that they had seen her text with Ale and should expect to be sued. Now, here's where things don't add up. Blake and her team keep claiming they obtained these messages through a subpoena. But how could they have accessed them instantly? Subpoenas take months to process. The timing just doesn't make sense. To me, it looks like Blake isn't telling the truth. That's just my opinion, but the facts seem to support it. Once armed with Ale's private text messages and communications, Blake Lively and Sloan's team allegedly worked closely with the New York Times to craft a story that shifted the blame for Lively's PR disaster onto Wayfair. The lawsuit claims that when Wayfair and Justin Baldoni finally stood their ground, refusing to release a humiliating false statement taking blame, the real battle began. According to Wayfair's legal filing, Sloan's team, Lively, Ryan Reynolds, and the New York Times collaborated for months to build a damaging article and video. This media attack was reportedly timed to align with Lively's complaint filed with the California Civil Rights Department, an alleged move to cement her victim narrative. As a result, Wayfair has suffered untold damage. What's truly shocking is the idea that someone could be so desperate to repair their public image that they'd flip the script, turning the narrative around to target those who weren't facing backlash. Unlike Lively, Justin Baldoni wasn't caught up in the PR storm. A major reason for this, he had the backing of Colleen Hoover's massive fan base, who adored him for how he promoted the film. He openly discussed its sensitive themes with care and respect while maintaining professionalism. He never publicly criticized Lively. On the contrary, he often praised her work on the film. Yet, despite this, the battle behind the scenes was growing more intense. And as we've seen before in Hollywood, the fight for public perception can be ruthless. Throughout the promotion of It Ends With Us, it wasn't the story or its important themes that Blake Lively focused on. It was herself. Time and time again, she used the press tour to plug her own brands, from her hair care line to her alcohol company. And if that wasn't enough, she even hijacked interviews about It Ends With Us to promote Deadpool and Wolverine, a film from a rival studio releasing at the same time as hers. Imagine this. You're at a Coca-Cola event, giving an interview, and suddenly, mid-conversation, you blurt out, "By the way, have you tried Pepsi? It's incredible." Or picture being at a Microsoft conference and casually throwing in, "I love my Mac. Apple is just the best." That's exactly what Blake was doing. These weren't slip-ups. They were intentional moves. She wasn't focused on the film she was supposed to be promoting. She was pushing her own agenda, boosting her husband's project, and ensuring her personal brand stayed in the spotlight. What's even more baffling, she completely avoided addressing the core themes of the film, domestic abuse and survival. Instead, she continuously reframed the narrative, calling it a story of hope and avoiding direct conversations about its serious subject matter. This raises a big question. Was this really about It Ends With Us, or was it always just about Blake? I can't stand the word multitudes being used to describe women. It's vague, overused, and honestly, Blake might need a new thesaurus. Now, let's talk about what's outlined in the response to the motion to dismiss. According to the claims, Leslie Sloan, using her media connections, pushed a narrative to various outlets, painting Justin Baldoni as a sexual predator. The accusations? That he allegedly assaulted Blake Lively and launched a smear campaign against her. And according to this claim, that's the real reason Blake faced backlash. Not because she was constantly self-promoting, not because she interrupted interviews, dismissed reporters, or made questionable PR choices on the press tour. No, it was all supposedly because of Justin Baldoni. That's the story they're pushing, but the lawsuit alleges otherwise. It states that the Sloan team gave the New York Times certain text messages, conveniently leaving out the ones that proved the allegations were false. And that's where the so-called untraceable smear campaign falls apart. Anyone in PR could see that the real reason for Blake's bad press wasn't some secret campaign. It was her own decisions. Promoting liquor and hair care products while marketing a film about domestic violence, that alone was a PR disaster waiting to happen. The idea that her backlash was the result of some elaborate plot, it's almost laughable. And according to this legal response, pushing that narrative was not only reckless, but completely baseless. The first amended complaint lays out enough evidence to suggest actual malice on the part of Sloan's team and other defendants. By pushing this narrative and blaming an untraceable smear campaign, they were able to craft their own version of events. But here's where things get questionable. Why was it done this way? It almost feels like Blake's reputation took such a severe hit that her only way to bounce back was to turn to one of the biggest newspapers in the country. She needed them to run a story based on the civil rights complaint she filed in California, while carefully curating which text messages she shared. And that's where things don't add up. Leslie Sloan, a seasoned publicist, was deeply involved in this. But did she really believe this strategy would hold up under scrutiny? Blake Lively and her PR team, led by Leslie Sloan, allegedly took extreme measures to control the narrative surrounding her public image. Reports claim that Sloan, who previously worked with controversial figures, played a key role in spreading damaging allegations against Justin Baldoni and Jamie Heath, falsely accusing them of serious misconduct. Throughout the press tour, Blake repeatedly promoted her own businesses, her hair care and alcohol brands, rather than focusing on the film's message. She even used interviews to talk about Deadpool and Wolverine, a competing movie which raised loyalty to the project. Wayfair's legal team argues that Blake and her team carefully manipulated the media, selectively leaking messages to portray herself as the victim of a smear campaign. However, critics believe her downfall was the result of her own actions, not a conspiracy against her. With all these shocking details, the real question remains: was this an orchestrated media strategy, or did Blake's own choices lead to the fallout? Stay tuned as we uncover the full story. While working in a professional environment, I encountered inappropriate behavior when coworkers were caught viewing explicit content. I reported it to HR, distanced myself from them, and they were eventually relocated. One was even fired. That's the proper protocol for dealing with workplace misconduct. So, if Blake Lively truly faced harassment on set, why didn't she take the same approach? Why would she continue working on a project she deemed beneath her? She doesn't need the paycheck. Her husband is wealthy. If the situation was as serious as she claims, why stay? The allegations she's making don't add up. Calling someone sexy or a subtle gesture like biting one's lip, are these truly harassment? The film itself includes intimate scenes, so the context matters, and comparing a still image of childbirth to explicit content, that argument seems stretched. At best, if these were real concerns, she should have followed the proper legal and industry protocols. That's why I question her claims, because real workplace harassment is handled through HR, unions, or official complaints, not selective media leaks. So, what's the real story here? Blake couldn't file a union complaint because she was already violating its rules, working without a signed contract. She couldn't involve SAG because doing so would expose her own misconduct. If she hadn't signed a contract and was using that as leverage, does that sound like someone genuinely experiencing harassment? These aren't the steps a real victim takes. As someone who has faced workplace harassment, I know the process. My employer believed me because there was evidence. But many women aren't so lucky. Some are ignored, some aren't believed. And Blake's actions make it harder for real victims to be taken seriously. What's frustrating is the idea that if you don't believe Blake, you don't believe women. No, I don't believe Ryan either. He's just as involved. He wanted control, she wanted control. If they despised Wayfair so much, why take over the project? Why bring in their own team, push people out, and force changes instead of just walking away? The answer is simple. Leaving would have put them in breach of contract. Instead, she weaponized that contract, breaking it repeatedly, then twisting it to her advantage. And now, mainstream outlets won't even consider Bond's side of the story. They just accept Blake's version as fact. But we already know. Mr. Reynolds isn't as innocent as he seems. They will lie about anything. Blake has admitted it herself. Their reputation is their only concern, and they crave admiration like an addiction. Ryan openly says he thrives on external validation. That tells you everything you need to know. What infuriates me is that they made this public when they didn't have to. They could have handled it legally in California without involving the press, but they chose to leak it. Why? Because they wanted the PR boost. Blake is obsessed with how people see her. A normal person wouldn't run to the media screaming, "Look, here's my proof, please don't hate me." Only someone desperate for public approval would do that. I'm a small content creator, a low-influence public figure, as she would say. People talk trash about me daily. There are even entire channels dedicated to tearing me down. And guess what? I don't care, because when you know the truth, why does it matter what others say? That's why I don't believe them. They're doing this because they know it's true, and they need a way out. That's why Blake is now using a CIA operative for crisis PR. This whole thing, just a PR game? That's exactly why Judge Lewis. Lyman called it a battle between PR agencies, because that's all it is. A fight for reputation. And in the middle of it all, Justin got destroyed. Now, he's not perfect, but honestly, if I were him, I would have fired Blake immediately for acting like that. But hey, hindsight is 20/20. So, what do you think about this spin? Are you surprised? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to my channel, and hit the bell so you never miss an update. Thanks for watching. Bye, guys.